Hey everyone, it's Shawn. Welcome to another edition of the Journey to CEO show. Today we're going to be talking about iterative processes in your business, and this can really unlock thinking about how to grow the business, how to get better at what you're doing. Joining me as usual is Dr. Ann Gaddy. She is my co-author. We wrote together a book called Redirection, which is a guide for how to move your business forward after the pandemic. And then also we're working on a larger book, Journey to CEO, which brings together stories, lessons about how do you move from being a business owner to actually becoming a CEO or somebody who runs an enterprise. So, Dr. Ann, this is going to be an interesting topic today.
It's great to be here again. These weeks fly by, don't they?
They do.
Yeah. After another. So, but we are still talking about redirection, and we know that a lot of people are just itching to get back to designing strategy and getting things rolling again. Maybe they've done some pivoting, maybe they've found other revenue streams, what have you. But I think that this is a time when you have to be really careful as well. And so we wanted to talk about the iterative process, because this is a situation where rather than looking at a situation, saying, here are my resources, here's my plan, and then I'm just going to execute it. Instead of working in that process, you're liable to find that you've had some flawed assumptions you didn't even realize, hidden assumptions that weren't accurate. And so it's much better to do prototypes where you may say, here's a situation where I think this product is going to be what the consumers now are going to be asking for or buying. Before you invest heavily in that, you need to do some, obviously, testing. So we talk about prototypes in this manner.
And this is something I see with my best clients, right? The best clients, the ones that grow well and grow fast, that's usually the attitude is not, we're going to do this. We're going to test this, right? Just that difference in framework of how they think about things. And, the ones that tend to grow and find solutions and find their way out into the market a very successful way, usually what they're thinking is they're thinking in terms of test.
Right.
And when I compare it to some of my clients that have had a harder time over the years, a lot of times they come in with the attitude of, we've got this all figured out. We've got it mapped out. We're going to do this, and this, and they've got it all laid out. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have a plan. You shouldn't understand how the dots connect, but that attitude of just saying, hey, we got to go in there and try some stuff out and see what happens and then adjust is really a game changer.
Well, I think that it allows you to try something, learn from it, move, so you're constantly learning. But in this particular situation, we talked about being agile. You still have to be able to do this process quickly. So you want to be able to continually be learning. You have a learning cycle that is very short. And so it's doing these prototypes and service industries would be the same way. It's not just products, concrete products, but it's any service or product that you offer. You really do need to be able to gather some data as you're moving along and be able to still be agile and pivot slightly as you may need it to pivot, because we are very in an unstable time. I mean, that's just the way it is. If we were in a very stable time, we could sit and write our strategic plan and know, okay, we can just follow this along because the environment's stable. However, It is not stable, and that's why we constantly have to be, almost doing some going out into the area and checking things and constantly going out and looking at what's happening in the communities and what is the behavior, what is the consumer behavior as you're going along, always checking on that.
Yeah, those conversations with the marketplace are critical, right? We need to engage in a two-way conversation with our customers, even with our vendors. We talked about supply chain issues, et cetera.
Right.
So we've got to constantly be looking at what's happening in the marketplace and how we're interacting with it, particularly right now, because so much is changing. We're in a period of flux. I mean, we were already pre-pandemic, the technology was starting to create changes. And now the pandemic with the regulatory environment, et cetera, change is just something that we can anticipate being a big part of our business world for the foreseeable future.
Well, and so prototyping would also include the supply chain, because we're still finding there's a backlog where you're getting manufacturers unable to deliver things for still several months to the stores and such. I mean, there's an incredible lag right now still occurring.
Yeah, there's a lot of spotty issues with the supply chain, and for people who are doing bigger projects, I mean, you're talking about real problems because it's the weakest link in the chain, and if a lot of times one link is missing from the chain, one particular critical supply is missing. I had a conversation the other week, and I think you and I talked about this a little bit offline. I had a conversation with a roofer, and roof shingles, for those that aren't aware, who aren't in that industry, they've been hard to come by. And the roofer was telling me what was happening is the prices of the different colors of roof were varying greatly, right? So, one color would be out of stock, and then everybody would shift to another color. And then that color would run out of stock, and then there'd be another color that would become popular. And he said the prices were moving all over the place because everybody kept trying to bid up these different colors of roofs. And he said for him, it's a very hard thing because he doesn't know what colors he can get for his clients, and he doesn't know what they're going to cost because this market's moving so fast. Something you're usually not used to, right? Because normally in a normal environment, people pick the color of their roof and they get it delivered. It's creating challenges for him, and it creates he's having a harder time communicating with his clients because of it.
Well, so you've got to have the iterative process in the supply chain for getting your supplies that you need. You've got to have that. You've got to have a constant conversation with your client or customers and the marketplace. And then the other area would be actually your workforce and how they're coming together, because now you're trying to decide, should we still be remote? Should we bring them back?
Yes.
We need the hub with the corporate headquarters. And, there were some assumptions early on that people working from home, for example, would not be as productive as they would have been in the office in person. And we found that assumption to be very flawed. And in most cases, not all, but in most cases, people have been very productive working from home, and then they have more time because they're not commuting. So just how you put the work process together should be something that you're testing as well. So it's people, it's your strategy, it is everything that every component of your business should be tested at this point.
Yeah, you and I are big fans of systems and processes, and that's a key to key to growing a business. But I think what we're layering in today is, from a thinking standpoint, from a culture standpoint, is we need to constantly be questioning those systems and processes, and we need to build a way for us to test those systems and processes regularly, right? So you talk about working from home, people are now figuring that out through that process, but that means you have to adjust your processes. Many businesses had to completely realign their processes because of work from home. But if it's working efficiently, now you want to make that part of your long-term goal, and you've got to do the testing and figure out the new ways for workflows, for employee interactions, so that things keep moving forward, right? I mean, I talked to an organization a while ago, everybody's working from home, and they were saying things were running slower because of physical delivery of stuff, right? Stuff, it's not the same as being in an office where you can just pass things around physically, paperwork, et cetera. They've got to come up with a new process, right? It's not an acceptable answer to say, hey, we just can't do things as fast because everybody's working from home. You got to figure out how to employ technology and test new ways to adjust your systems.
Well, and the testing that you're doing is also testing your assumptions. We have hidden assumptions we don't really even know, that we have, because they're so ingrained in our thinking and in our mindset. So there are a lot of aha moments that come out of this kind of an approach where you're continually cycling through and testing and improving, testing, shifting, all of that allows you to be successful in the end run.
Yeah, and it's a cultural issue too, right? Because you got to go back to your employees and say, what can we do better, right? We talked about this in another conversation, right? A lot of companies have not built that feedback loop. Your frontline employees, they're seeing what's working, what's not working. If they have suggestions on what to test next, bring them in, right? Say, hey, what should we be iterating to next, right? It's become part of your culture, top to bottom, is everybody should be looking for things to test and try and to improve.
Right. And that comes with respect of your clientele and your employees, that you are willing to listen and take their suggestions and test them and see, is this a valid point? Is this something that can really be helpful? And, you talked about the Sonic ice situation.
Yes.
Where an employee actually came to them. And you might want to use that example again, because I think that's an eye-opener.
Yeah, Dr. Darren Martin told me about this, and he was in touch with a franchisee who owned a bunch of Sonics, and basically one of the employees flagged it for the leadership team, for the management, and said, people are coming here specifically for our ice. They're coming to buy drinks because they like our ice. What if we just took, they already had the ice maker. They already got the restaurant. They already got the employees there. He said, how about we just take the ice out of the ice maker and bag it up, and then, it'll refill itself because it's commercial ice maker, plenty of capacity. And that's literally what they did. They started bagging the ice up, and it over several locations, it became a multi-million-dollar a year top line revenue with very little additional expense, because all you got going into is water and maybe a little additional maintenance on your ice machine because you're using it more, but they're shipping the ice out and millions of dollars to the top line.
Yeah. So, and that's that test, and, and you see what the results are, they tested it, it worked.
Yeah, and as an aside, folks, I dropped a link for our email list. So go ahead and jump over there and sign up for our email list if you aren't on it, so we can bring you tips and tricks. But McDonald's, is classic with this, right? I mean, they of course have a lot of locations and they have that advantage, but they'll say, hey, let's go test a sandwich at a couple of restaurants or in a particular market. Let's see how it does.
Right.
And if it does well, then we'll roll it out nationally, right? So that's kind of a microcosm. Of course, most of us here don't have the scale of McDonald's. We don't have thousands of locations, but we could say, hey, well, why doesn't employee A try doing it this way? Employee B does it that way. Employee C does it the way we used to do. And let's see who's finding it to be a more efficient system. And then we can copy and paste and roll it out. There's different ways we can test even in smaller organizations.
Yeah, I just think our viewers out there, all of you, just need to remember that this environment is still unstable, and to invest heavily in one solution is probably more risk than you would want to do. So we do suggest that you test things and that you design prototypes so that you can confirm what your assumptions are they valid or not? And moving forward, have you communicated this well and allowed your staff to be a part of the solution? That becomes a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, live viewers, I see some of you are out there watching us live. I know some of you pick us up on recording, but drop a comment. Let us know something you've iterated on or something you've tested in your business. We'd love to hear some more success stories. And feature them here on the channel. But, that's it, right? I mean, and it's got to be a culture. And that's the thing I really focus on is one thing to say, okay, we're the leadership, we're going to iterate. The truth is the leadership just doesn't even generally know what to test, right? Especially once you get an organization of any scale. Those ideas for what to test and what to iterate on are going to come from your customers or your line level employees. They will tell you, hey, I could do this better, or it would be more efficient if, or how about we try this, right? So we got to look outside the box for answers here.
Well, and I also think the leadership needs to encourage trying new things and being creative. And if it fails, it's okay. You know, people have to know that it's okay to make a mistake, that there is respect for being creative, there is respect for trying, and that it's not a losing situation, it's a learning situation.
Yeah.
And so that becomes incredibly important for leadership to support the learning opportunities and not criticize people who may make mistakes along the way as they're trying new things.
Exactly. You know, that's critical. I remember talking to an employee one time at a company, and this gentleman was telling me that they had like certain different categories of things you were qualified to do, right? You could get new qualifications to take on additional tasks. And he's like, but what happens is people would get qualified to take on additional tasks, and then if they would take on the new task and they would mess up, they would get in trouble or they would get fired.
Yeah.
And so this person's attitude was, why do I want to take on any additional tasks, right? Let me stay in my comfort zone. I don't want to do any other things beyond my comfort zone. I don't want to do these other qualifications because all that means to me is risk. And so that's the top down, bringing a culture where people are afraid of risk. So we got to be careful about how we set up our incentives within our companies, because if we do have the wrong incentives, people are going to be afraid to do a test, because then they're going to view that that's going to hurt their employment file, or maybe they'll be viewed as inefficient because they ran a test and it didn't work out. We've got to come up with ways to encourage people to do tests and embrace the fact that we tried something and failed, but we learned from it.
Well, and I think that's another topic we need to address. And maybe this is our next topic, but is how do you communicate when you know, among your staff members and to the community? How are those communication styles and strategies changing if you are in an iterative environment? You know, you're using the iterative processes and you're trying to be more efficient in what you're doing. That is going to, you know, that's going to change. And I think especially if we're trying to design an agile organization, which is what, of course, we encourage, then the communication strategies have to change, because you're going to have more teamwork. You're going to have a lot of things that are in place that require continual communication, but not overburdening people.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons. That's a big excuse I hear from people why they don't iterate, is because, you know, it takes time and attention to test something, right? You have to stop. Right. You have to break your current process. You have to try the new process. You have to, you know, pay attention to what's happening. And, you know, it really gives you one or two choices, right? You can do the iterations and go through that trouble, or you keep doing the same things. And the problem with that is that usually doesn't work over the long term. They usually eventually break.
Well, yeah. And I think if you're in design and designing new things, new products, any kind of design work, you're going to be more successful using a prototype process.
Yeah, exactly. So you got to do that. Talk some about. We were talking about the Marshmallow Towers before we got on officially, and why don't you tell folks about that? And I think there's some important lessons in that.
Well, people can go to marshmallowchallenge.com and see some of the examples, but Skillman came up with this idea that, you know, he wanted to show the difference between having just a set process in place or having a iterative process. And what he found was that he would divide people into groups of 4 in a workshop, and then they would have 20 pieces of spaghetti, a yard of string, a yard of masking tape, and a marshmallow. And the challenge was to see how high you could build the spaghetti tower and have a marshmallow on top. And it is really fascinating, because he found that those that were most likely to have challenges with it and not be successful were your individuals who are out of business school, what have you, and would have they would look at a situation and then plan out what they were going to do, and here's the one solution, and we're just going to execute it that way. So they would find
Right.
someone who had a process that they thought, okay, that's going to work, and we're all behind it. And yet the recent graduates of kindergarten were more likely to test. They didn't have any of the assumptions that people might have about the weight of a marshmallow. You think it doesn't weigh much, and yet they put it on top, and then they have an because they've come to the end of 18 minutes, which is all you're allowed for this challenge, and they find it fails, and they have no time to fix it. As opposed to the kindergartners who are testing it all along with their and trying different things and coming up with really creative solutions. So we also found, when I've done this, and we find that if you have someone who knows process, like CEOs didn't do particularly well, but when you added an executive assistant to their team, they were much better. They were much more successful. So there's certain people that do well in this challenge, but once you go back, and if you've asked people, okay, you did this challenge, now we're going to come back in 4 months, do it again, they understand the iterative process, and they're going to be much more successful. So we see that it's a mindset that just has to be tried and embraced.
Yeah, and I can see that being, kind of, the mindset of, we got to test it before we do it, right? So most people think, plan it, do it, right? And that's that business school graduate you speak of, right? Plan it, do it. Whereas the kindergartner says, I don't know how to do it. Let me try a couple different things and see what works, right? Because that's kind of what they're used to doing with the Legos or whatever. They're
right. And they just design things. They have no idea that they have to design a plan and then execute the plan. Those days of plan your work and work your plan are sort of behind us, I think, because there are just too many chances to fail in this environment.
Yeah, and I think certainly for things you've done before, right? You come up with a process, you repeat the process, you use the process over and over again. But for things that are new or novel or a changing environment, you got to go in with this different attitude of, we're going to try this, we're going to see how it works, we're going to see how people respond, and we'll then go back and take our feedback and we'll use it, right? It's really a different attitude. And it requires different staffing, right? Because some people they want direction. Do this now, and doesn't always lend itself to the modern environment.
Yeah, but even if you've been doing a process for years and years and years, it's time to test things again, because the environment has just shifted so dramatically that I literally tell clients that they need to let's really do a rehaul here and see a revision or a review, an after action review, and just make sure we are doing things, that are efficient and effective.
It makes perfect sense, right? So I think it's just a different attitude. So I think that's a good lesson for today, Dr. Ann. I think we'll come back and we'll kind of build on some more elements of this, folks. I hope you're subscribed to our email list, and I put that link up earlier. I also hope you subscribe to the Journey to CEO YouTube channel, because we want to keep bringing you these lessons and build this community. We're glad you're here. And so many of you are tuning in live, and start telling your friends and bringing them, because this is really a group thing. And as we get a little bit bigger here, we're going to have some opportunities to work together on these things. So I hope you stay tuned. Dr. Ann, why don't you tell about redirection?
Redirection is when you say talk about it, you mean the book?
Tell about the book. Yeah, tell them what we did.
Okay, so we did a book on redirection, which is pivoting, and it's fun because it has not only some anecdotes, but also some action steps that you can take, so that we sort of take you through the process of pivoting and help you redesign where and where you want to end up. So it's a short read. It's something we just did to preface our Journey to CEO book. We're as part of a trilogy we're doing here, and then we're going to do one on branding. But it's on Amazon. Redirection, Shawn McBride and Ann Gaddy. So we recommend that you download it. And if you have any questions, always contact us.
Yeah, go check it out, folks. It's a great read. It will really help you think a little bit different about getting through the pandemic. And of course, we welcome you to reach out to us. We're on LinkedIn. Of course, you get our email list. Once you get an email from me, you can reply back to it. So we look forward to keeping in touch with you and hearing about your business questions. If you have topics for us, go ahead and comment. Let us know what you want to see in the future or how we can help you. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Pat yourself on the back, and we'll see you again soon for another edition of the Journey to CEO Show.